Hello, World War II history buffs. As you know, I've done about 12 years of interviews with World War II veterans, and they've shared some amazing things with me. Some of these folks I've got 1 hour up to 3 hours of DVD interview with, but I've talked to them for hours and hours, many of them that are not on film. And I'd like to talk tonight about something that they didn't even know about then. They knew they had some of the problems and the symptoms, but it's PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. There was no such terminology when these fellows got out of the service, many of them by Christmas of 1945. But they sure had the symptoms. I'd like to tell you tonight about a fellow that was in the 2nd Marine Division. His name was Bill. I knew him for about 3 years. He caught the horrible battles of Tarawa, Saipan, and Tinian, was involved in one of the last major banzai charges on Saipan in the summer of 1944. He was going out to work as a forward observer for artillery with the infantry, and about 4,000 Japanese came rushing right at him. The only funny thing he told me about it was that he's sure he could have outran Jesse Owens that day to get back to the gun pit. These Japanese soldiers ran right into 155 millimeter cannons that was pointed point blank at them, and they all died, but I think one or two. Anyway, Bill, when he wanted to go into Marine Corps, went from one state to another to enlist because he could get in quicker. But he says that World War II absolutely, and he didn't use the word messed up, but I will, the next 50 years of his life. He had terrible dreams. He didn't talk to anybody about what he had seen, what he had been through. And I guess the real true thing to me was when Korea came along after he had served for about 4 years in the Marine Corps and some horrible battles. Just look up Tarawa or the Gilbert Islands or Saipan and Tinian. When Korea came along in 1950 or 51, where he had went out of his way to enlist in 42, he went to the mountains. He wasn't evading or draft dodging. He'd already done his time. He just simply couldn't do it again. And when I met him, in about 2007 or 8, he set up alone at night, drinking. I'm not saying heavily, just very often. He was alone, just a fine man, but lonely. But I think to me, just knowing that he went to the mountains of West Virginia. I'll stop at that, but I'm going to talk about many, many more of the men that have shared so many things that today would be called PTSD. Again, they just didn't have that term. They called it battle fatigue or shell shock, but it was PTSD. So look in again and listen up to hear what these men have went through for you and I. A great movie was called The Best Years of Our Lives. Just a great movie made in 1946 about 5 or 4 returning veterans. And one was played by, if you look at the movie, he was the bombardier on a B-17. He'd wake up Dana Andrews was the actor. But he would wake up in the middle of the night in the cold sweat screaming for his buddy to get out of that airplane, get out of that airplane, to parachute out of that airplane. And I've known many guys from the 8th Air Force that were shot down in B-24s and B-17s. The terror they went through, one guy's chute didn't open from 30,000 feet until treetop level. Anyway, check in again for another time where I'll talk about what I'm sure was PTSD from many of these men. Take care, World War II fans, and they're not fans, that's not the right word, World War II history buffs. Be thankful Thank God for what these men did for us, because our lives would not be the great lives we've had for 65 years. These men have suffered emotionally for 70 years. Good night.